The shuttle docked with a soft hiss, and Kira Voss stepped onto station Veleris for the first time. The air tasted different here, filtered, recycled, stripped of everything that made it feel alive. She had spent 17 years breathing the thick, heavy air of Earth, full of pollen and dust and the smell of rain on hot concrete. This air had no smell at all. It was like breathing nothing. The docking bay was enormous. Curved walls of pale metal stretched upward into a ceiling that glowed with soft blue light. Hundreds of beings moved through the space, tall ones, short ones, some that floated, some that crawled. Colors she had never seen on living creatures. Sounds she could not name. Kira pulled her bag tighter against her shoulder and walked forward. She was one of 3 human exchange students selected for the Galactic Union Scholastic Academy. The program was new. Humanity had only been granted provisional membership in the Union 2 years ago, after first contact with a Veleris trading vessel near Jupiter. 2 years was nothing in galactic politics. Most species on this station had been Union members for thousands of years. Humans were the newcomers, the outsiders, the unknowns. And Earth was classified as a Class 12 Deathworld, the highest survivable rating in the Union's Planetary Danger Index. Kira did not fully understand what that meant to them, not yet. She followed the glowing path markers on the floor toward the student registration hall. As she walked, she noticed something strange. The crowd was parting around her. Not dramatically, not with panic, but with a quiet, steady movement like water flowing around a stone. Beings glanced at her and then looked away. A group of tall, crystalline creatures, Jorath, she remembered from her briefing files, stopped their conversation as she passed. Their faceted eyes tracked her for a moment, and then they moved on, speaking in lower voices. At the registration desk, a Chiik administrator, an insectoid being with 4 compound eyes and delicate mandibles, processed her documents. Its hands trembled slightly as it handed her the student orientation packet. "Welcome to the Academy," it said, its translator producing flat, emotionless words. "Please review the enclosed materials carefully." Kira thanked it with a smile. The Chiik flinched. She did not understand why. On Earth, a smile meant warmth, friendliness, welcome. Here, in a galaxy where most species had evolved as prey animals on gentle, temperate worlds, baring your teeth was something predators did before they killed you. She found her dormitory room small, clean, empty. A single window looked out into the vastness of space. She unpacked her things and sat on the bed and read through the orientation packet. Most of it was standard, class schedules, campus maps, dining hall hours. But tucked between the pages was an additional document that the other students had not received. It was titled Behavioral Restraint Agreement for Class 9 and Above Deathworld Species. Kira read it slowly. She was required to submit to regular psychological evaluations. She was prohibited from engaging in sudden or rapid physical movements in shared spaces. She was required to announce her presence when entering a room with fewer than 10 occupants. She was advised to avoid predatory vocalizations, which included laughing loudly, speaking sharply, or sighing with force. She signed it. She had promised her father she would. Her father, retired from the United Nations Diplomatic Corps, had held her hands at the spaceport on Earth and looked into her eyes and said, "You are not just a student out there, Kira. You are an ambassador. Everything you do, they will see as something all humans do. Be patient. Be kind. Show them who we really are." She had nodded and hugged him and tried not to cry. The first week was difficult. In classes, professors seated her at the back of the room. Lab partners refused to work with her. In the dining hall, tables emptied when she sat down. She heard the word Deathworlder whispered so many times it began to feel like her actual name. She tried everything. She moved slowly. She spoke softly. She kept her hands visible at all times because apparently hidden hands suggested concealed weapons to prey-evolved species. She did not laugh loudly. She did not run. She did not reach for things quickly. She made herself as small and unthreatening as a human being could possibly be. It was not enough. On the fourth day, she was sitting alone in the Academy's garden, a vast indoor space filled with plants from dozens of worlds, when a voice spoke behind her. "Is this seat available?" Kira turned. A Veleris girl stood there, slender, pale blue skin, large dark eyes, 4 arms. But something was different about her. 3 of her arms were long and graceful. The fourth, the upper left, was shorter, thinner, visibly underdeveloped. She held it close to her body as if trying to hide it. "Yes," Kira said carefully, "please." The girl sat down. "My name is Selha. I have seen you in our xenobiology lectures." "I'm Kira." "I know everyone knows who you are." Selha paused. "I wanted to say that I think it is unfair how they treat you." Kira blinked. In 4 days, this was the first kind thing anyone had said to her. "Thank you, that means a lot." They talked for an hour. Selha explained that she was an outcast too. Her shortened arm was a birth defect, rare among Veleris and deeply stigmatized. In Veleris culture, physical symmetry was considered a sign of spiritual completeness. Her defect marked her as unfinished. Her family had sent her off-world to study partly because they were ashamed. 2 broken creatures on a station full of beings who did not want them. They became friends immediately. Over the following days, Selha showed Kira the hidden corners of the station, quiet observation decks, empty study rooms, maintenance corridors where nobody went, places where Kira could exist without being stared at. In return, Kira told Selha about Earth, about oceans and mountains and thunderstorms, and the way the sky turned orange at sunset. Selha listened with wide eyes, fascinated and terrified in equal measure. But not everyone watched Kira with curiosity. Ravik was the son of a powerful Joreth noble family. Tall, broad, his crystalline body catching the light like a walking chandelier. He moved through the academy like he owned it, because in many ways his family did. They were among the largest donors. He had a circle of followers, mostly Joreth, who laughed at his jokes and agreed with his opinions and looked the other way when he was cruel. Ravik hated humans, not quietly, not privately, openly and proudly. He called them a gravity-crushed vermin. He said their inclusion in the Union was a political mistake that would be corrected. He said these things loudly in common areas where Kira could hear them. She said nothing. She kept walking. She kept smiling, even though every smile made them flinch. One evening, returning to her dormitory, she passed Ravik and his group in a corridor. They went silent as she approached. She kept her eyes forward and her pace steady. As she passed, Ravik spoke not to her, but loud enough for her to hear. "It does not matter what the council says. Animals do not belong in schools. We just need to remind everyone what it really is." Kira kept walking. Her hands were steady. Her face was calm, but something cold settled in her stomach, and it did not go away for a long time. It started with small things. Kira would return to her dormitory and find her door scratched with words carved deep into the metal in trade script, the common written language of the Union. "Deathworld or filth. Go back to your killing ground. Animals eat in cages, not classrooms." She reported it to the residential coordinator, an elderly Joreth who listened politely, took notes, and did absolutely nothing. Then it moved into her academic life. Lab samples she had spent hours preparing were destroyed overnight. Research files were corrupted. An essay she submitted on comparative planetary evolution, something she had worked on for 2 weeks, was flagged by an anonymous complaint alleging plagiarism. The investigation cleared her, but it cost her 3 days and a late submission penalty that dropped her grade. She knew who was behind it. Everyone knew. Ravik did not even bother to hide it. He would pass her in the corridors the morning after each incident and look at her with those cold, faceted eyes, and there would be something like amusement in them. He was daring her to react. She did not react. Kira went to the Academy's Office of Student Welfare. She sat in a waiting room designed for beings twice her size, and filled out complaint forms on a tablet that did not have a human language option. She wrote everything in trade script, carefully, slowly, making sure every word was correct. She filed the forms and was told that an investigation would be conducted. No investigation was ever conducted. The Galactic Union operated under cultural sensitivity laws that had been written by the elder species, the Jorath, the Veleris, the Chiik, and a dozen others who had been part of the Union for millennia. These laws were designed to protect established cultures from disruption. They were not designed to protect a newly admitted species that most of the galaxy still considered barely civilized. Kira had no legal advocacy body on the station, no species representative, no one whose job it was to stand up for her. She was alone in a system that had not been built for her. Selha watched all of this with growing anger. She would sit with Kira in their quiet places, the empty observation deck on level 7, the maintenance corridor behind the water recycling plant, and listen to Kira describe each new incident with a calm, measured voice that made Selha want to scream. "You do not have to accept this," Selha said one evening. They were sitting on the floor of the observation deck, their backs against the cold wall, watching cargo ships drift past the station's outer ring. "There are other ways to fight back. I could help you. I am good with systems. I could find proof, records, something that would force the administration to act." Kira shook her head. "If I fight back, even through official channels in an aggressive way, it changes the story. Right now, I am a student being harassed. The moment I push too hard, I become the dangerous Deathworlder they all think I am. I become the threat. That is not fair." "No, it is not." Selha was quiet for a long time. Then she said softly, "You are the strongest person I have ever met, and I do not mean your muscles." Kira almost smiled, almost. The following week, something happened in xenobiology class that changed the way Kira understood her place on the station. Professor Thalene, a tall, willowy being from a low-gravity world whose species name Kira could not pronounce, had prepared a special lecture on extreme biospheres. The lights dimmed, and a holographic projection filled the center of the classroom. The projection showed a planet, blue and green and white, wrapped in clouds, turning slowly in the light of a yellow star. "Earth." Kira sat very still. The documentary began. It showed the oceans first beautiful, vast, and then the camera dove beneath the surface and found the predators. Sharks with rows of teeth, jellyfish trailing venomous tentacles, squid with beaks that could crack bone. The class murmured with unease. Then it showed the land. Forests where everything was in competition, trees strangling each other for sunlight, fungi dissolving living wood, insects that ate other insects that ate other insects. Predators everywhere, wolves, bears, big cats, snakes, spiders. A food chain built on violence from the microscopic level upward. Then the weather, hurricanes that could flatten cities, earthquakes that split the ground open, volcanoes that buried entire regions in ash and fire, lightning that struck the surface 40 times every second across the planet. Then the diseases, viruses that could kill millions, bacteria that evolved resistance to medicine, parasites that rewired the brains of their hosts. The class was no longer murmuring. They were silent. Some had turned pale. A Veleris student near the front had covered her eyes with two of her hands. Professor Thalene paused the projection. "This," she said, "is a Class 12 Deathworld, the highest survivable classification. Earth's gravity is nearly double the galactic average. Its atmosphere contains a highly reactive gas, oxygen, at concentrations that would be toxic to 60% of known species. Its biosphere operates on a principle of relentless, universal competition. Every organism on this planet exists because it outfought, outran, or outwitted something that was trying to kill it." She looked around the room. And yet from this world a sentient species emerged, a species that built civilizations, developed technology, and eventually reached the stars. A Chiik student raised a limb. How? How did intelligence develop in such an environment? Professor Thaline was quiet for a moment. Her expression was difficult to read, but Kira thought she saw something unexpected in it. Something like respect. "We do not fully understand," the professor said. "Current theory suggests that the extreme selection pressures of a death world forced the development of advanced problem-solving, social cooperation, and emotional complexity far beyond what is typical for sentient species. In simple terms, their world was so dangerous that the only way to survive was to become extraordinary." The room was silent. Kira felt every eye in the classroom turned toward her. She kept her gaze on the holographic Earth, still turning slowly in the blue light, and she thought of her father's garden back home, where flowers grew between the cracks in old concrete, and birds sang at dawn, and the rain fell warm and soft in summer. That was Earth too, but they would never show that part. After class, she walked back to her dormitory through the main corridor. Ravik was waiting. He was not alone. 4 of his followers stood with him, 2 Jorath and 2 others, a large quadruped species whose name she did not know. They formed a loose semicircle that blocked her path. "Deathworlder," Ravik said. His voice was flat and hard like stones grinding together. "Did you enjoy seeing your home displayed like a horror show? That is what you are. That is what your world made you. A thing built for killing." Kira stopped. She looked at him. She looked at each of his followers. She measured the distance, the angles, the space. These were calculations her brain made automatically, millions of years of evolution running threat assessments in the background, faster than conscious thought. She could have gone through all 5 of them in seconds. She knew this with a certainty that was as natural as breathing. "Excuse me," she said quietly. "I need to get to my room." Ravik stepped closer. He was taller than her by a full meter. His crystalline body loomed over her, sharp edges catching the corridor light. "Does the animal want to pass? Then maybe the animal should crawl." One of his followers shoved her shoulder. The push was meant to be forceful, but Kira barely moved. Her body dense with muscle built in heavy gravity, her bones thick and strong, her joints reinforced by a lifetime of resisting a planet that pulled at everything with relentless force, simply absorbed the impact. She shifted her weight slightly and remained standing. The one who had pushed her stumbled backward. His eyes went wide. He had pushed with his full strength, and the human had not moved. Kira looked at Ravik one more time. Then she turned sideways and walked around the group, taking the long way, giving them space. She did not look back. In her room, she locked the door. She sat on her bed. She pressed her hands together to stop them from shaking, not from fear, but from the effort of keeping everything inside. A tear ran down her cheek, and then another, and then she pressed her face into her pillow and let herself cry without making a sound. Outside in the corridor, Ravik watched her door close. Then he pulled out a communicator and connected to a frequency that led off station. An older Jorath face appeared on the screen, sharp, political, calculating. "She did not react," Ravik said. "Then push harder," the older Jorath replied. "Everyone has a breaking point. Find hers. And when she breaks, make sure the cameras are recording. Humanity's council seat dies the moment that creature shows the galaxy what it really is." Ravik nodded and closed the connection. He looked at her door one final time, and then he walked away, already planning his next move. The Interspecies Cultural Festival was the biggest event of the academic year. The Academy's central atrium was transformed into a sprawling exhibition of food, music, art, and traditions from over 100 worlds. Colored lights floated in the air like living jewels. Strange and beautiful music played from every direction. The smell of alien cuisines, some sweet, some sharp, some completely beyond human senses, filled the recycled air with something almost alive. Kira had not planned to attend. She had learned that crowds meant more starring, more whispers, more chances for someone to bump into her and then cry out as if they had been burned. But Selha had insisted. "You cannot hide forever," Selha had said, her three good arms folded while the shorter one rested against her side. "You are a student at this academy. You have the right to be at this festival. And besides, I entered a Veleris light-weaving display, and I want someone there who will actually tell me if it is good or not." Kira had smiled at that. A real smile, the kind she did not allow herself in public anymore. "Fine, but if someone faints when I walk past a food stall, you are carrying them to medical." The festival was beautiful. For the first hour, Kira almost forgot where she was. She watched Selha's light-weaving display, threads of bioluminescent energy pulled from Selha's fingertips and woven into shapes that told stories from Veleris mythology. It was delicate and graceful, and Kira told her it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen, and she meant it. They walked through the exhibition halls together. A Chiic percussion group played rhythms that vibrated in Kira's chest. A species she had never encountered before, small, round, covered in soft golden fur, demonstrated a form of communal painting where 6 artists worked on the same canvas simultaneously, their movements perfectly synchronized. For 1 hour, the galaxy felt like it might actually be wonderful. Then Selha said she needed to return to her display area to pack up her equipment. Kira offered to help, but Selha waved her off. "Go try the Joreth crystal candy. I have heard it is incredible. I will meet you at the North Fountain in 20 minutes. Kira watched her go, weaving through the crowd with her head held high despite the occasional stares at her arm. Then Kira turned and walked toward the food stalls. She never reached them. A corridor branched off from the main atrium, a side passage that led to storage rooms and maintenance access. As Kira passed it, she heard something that stopped her cold. Selha's voice, crying out in pain. Kira turned into the corridor and saw them. Ravik stood in the center of the passage. 3 of his followers flanked him, 2 Joreth and a heavy-set quadruped, and on the ground, curled into a ball, was Selha. One of the Joreth had her by her shortened arm, her vulnerable, sensitive, underdeveloped arm, and was twisting it while the others laughed. "Look at it," Ravik said, his voice carrying that grinding, contemptuous tone. "A defective creature. 4 arms and it cannot even use them all. And this is the best friend the Deathworlder can find, something just as broken and useless as itself." Selha was trying to pull free, but the Joreth holding her was twice her weight. Her bioluminescent blood, pale blue, almost white, was already visible where the rough crystalline grip had cut into her skin. "Let her go," Kira's voice came out steady, quiet, controlled. Every head turned toward her. Ravik's eyes glittered. This was what he had been waiting for. Kira could see it in his posture, the subtle shift, the readiness. His followers adjusted their positions. One of them, she noticed, had something in his hand, a small device, dark metallic, shaped like a cylinder. "The animal speaks," Ravik said. "Come to protect your pet." "Let her go," Kira repeated. She did not move. She did not raise her voice. She kept her hands visible at her sides, open and empty. Ravik nodded to the Joreth holding Selha. The Joreth released her arm and shoved her. Selha hit the floor hard. Her head struck the metal surface and her bioluminescent blood spread in a thin blue line across the white floor. She made a small sound, not a scream, just a soft, hurt exhale, and went still. Something changed in Kira's eyes. The others could not have named it. They had no frame of reference for it. On Earth, every prey animal knew that look. It was the look a predator gave you in the half-second before the world narrowed down to 2 possible outcomes: you ran or you died. But Kira did not move, not yet. The follower with the device raised it and fired. The neural disruptor hit Kira in the left shoulder. The beam was designed to overwhelm a being's nervous system with cascading pain signals, enough to drop any standard galactic species into convulsions within seconds. It was technically illegal to possess on the station, but Ravik's connections ran deep. Pain exploded through Kira's body. White-hot, electric, screaming through every nerve. Her vision flashed, her muscles locked and then released. Every cell in her body was being told to collapse, to surrender, to shut down. But Kira Voss had grown up on Earth. She had broken her arm falling from a tree when she was 7, and had walked a kilometer home before her mother even knew she was hurt. She had been stung by a box jellyfish at 12, and had kept swimming to shore through pain that would have killed a Veleris outright. She had hiked through a thunderstorm at 15, with hail the size of marbles hammering her shoulders, because the trail down the mountain was the only way home. Her nervous system, forged in a world where pain was not an exception but a constant companion, absorbed the disruptor blast the way a deep ocean absorbs a stone. It hurt. It hurt enormously, but pain was an old friend. Pain was something her species had been negotiating with for 300,000 years. She gritted her teeth, she breathed in through her nose, she stayed on her feet. The corridor went silent. The follower who had fired stared at the disruptor in his hand as if it were broken. His species would have been unconscious before hitting the ground. The human was still standing. The human was looking at them. Ravik's confidence flickered, just for a moment. Then he hardened himself and turned to Selha, who was trying to push herself up from the floor, blood still running from the cut on her head. He drew back his foot and kicked her in the side. Selha gasped and collapsed again. Ravik looked directly at Kira. "You see, it cannot even protect its." Kira moved. There was no warning. No tensing of muscles, no shift in stance that their eyes could detect. One moment she was 3 meters away. The next she was there, right in front of Ravik, and her hand was around his wrist. She had crossed the distance in 2 steps. 2 steps that covered 3 meters in less than a second. Legs built for a world with nearly double the gravity they were standing in. Muscles that had spent 17 years fighting a planet for every movement. Fast-twitch fibers firing with a speed that the galactic species could not track with their eyes. Ravik tried to pull free. He could not move. His crystalline body, dense, rigid, twice her mass, was locked in place by a grip that should not have been possible from something her size. His joints creaked. Microfractures appeared in his crystalline wrist plating where her fingers held him. Kira looked up at him. She was shorter by a full meter. She had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes, but in that moment there was no question about who was in control. "You touch my friend," she said. Her voice was not loud. It was not angry. It was the quietest sound in the corridor, and it was the most terrifying thing any of them had ever heard. The follower with the disruptor raised it again. Without looking away from Ravik, Kira reached out with her other hand and took the weapon from him. She did not grab it, did not strike him, did not twist his arm. She simply closed her hand around the device and pulled it away with a force he could not resist, like a parent taking a dangerous toy from a child. She placed herself between Ravik's group and Selha's crumpled form. She released Ravik's wrist. He stumbled backward, cradling his arm, staring at the fracture lines in his plating with something she had never seen in his eyes before. "Fear." "Walk away," Kira said. They walked away. But it was already too late. In the corridor's ceiling, small and nearly invisible, a security camera had recorded everything. And somewhere in the crowd at the corridor's entrance, 3 students had been watching with their personal devices raised. The footage, not all of it, not the beginning, not the context, was already being uploaded to the galactic net. What they had captured was simple: a human Deathworlder grabbing a Jorath noble's son. Within minutes, station security arrived. Kira was still standing over Selha, who had managed to sit up but could not stand. The blue blood had dried on her face like a pale mask. They restrained Kira. They put energy cuffs on her wrists, designed for beings far stronger than any galactic species, kept on hand specifically for Deathworlders. They led her away. As she was taken past the gathering crowd, she saw Ravik standing with his followers, and she saw the expression on his face. The fear was gone. In its place was a smile, small, sharp, and satisfied. He had gotten exactly what he wanted. The holding cell was cold and white and very quiet. Kira sat on a metal bench with her hands between her knees and stared at the wall. The energy cuffs had been removed once she was inside, but she could still feel their weight, not on her wrists, but somewhere deeper, pressing down on her chest. She had failed. Everything her father had asked her to do, everything she had promised herself. Weeks of swallowing insults, of walking away, of making herself small and silent and harmless, all of it undone in 2 seconds. 2 steps across a corridor, one hand on a wrist. And now she was sitting in a cell while somewhere out on the galactic net, the story was being written without her. She did not know what was happening outside. She could not access any communications. The cell was designed for isolation, no windows, no screens, no sound from the world beyond the door. She was alone with the memory of Selha's blood on the white floor and the sound of Ravik's crystalline wrist cracking under her fingers. She had not meant to hurt him. She had calculated the force. Her brain had done it automatically, the way it always did, the way every human brain did when the body moved at combat speed. She had used enough pressure to stop him and no more. But Joreth were brittle compared to humans. What felt like a firm grip to her had fractured his plating. She wondered if Selha was okay. She pressed her forehead against the cold wall and closed her eyes. Outside the cell, the galaxy was on fire. The footage had spread faster than any news story in recent Union history. Within 1 hour, it was on every major galactic news network. Within 3 hours, it had been viewed 2 billion times. The headline on the Union's largest news platform was simple and devastating. Deathworld human attacks students at Veleris Academy. The clips were short, 15 seconds, 20 seconds, and they all showed the same thing. A small human female grabbing a Joreth student by the wrist with enough force to fracture crystalline bone. A human taking a weapon from another student's hand as if it were nothing. A human standing over a wounded Veleris, radiating something that the commentators called predatory territorial aggression. None of the clips showed what had come before: the weeks of harassment, the vandalism, the slurs, the kicked body of a defenseless girl on the floor, the neural disruptor blast that should have dropped Kira like a stone. None of that existed in the version of events that the galaxy was consuming. Anti-human sentiment exploded. On Station Veleris, a group of students organized a protest outside the Academy's main entrance, demanding the expulsion of all human exchange students. On 3 other Union stations, similar protests formed within hours. A Joreth political commentator went on the Galactic Net's most-watched news program and said, "This is exactly what we warned the Council about. You cannot domesticate a Deathworld species. You can only contain it." Formal charges were filed against Kira within 6 hours. Aggravated assault by a Deathworld species, a specific crime category under Union law, carrying penalties 3 times heavier than the same offense committed by a standard species. The laws had been written centuries ago, during a time when the Union was expanding into regions of space populated by dangerous, presentient Deathworld organisms. They had never been updated. They had never needed to be, until now. If convicted, Kira faced imprisonment, expulsion, and worse, a potential species-wide sanction that could revoke humanity's provisional seat on the Galactic Council, everything her father had worked for, everything the entire human diplomatic effort had built over 2 years, gone because a 17-year-old girl had grabbed someone's wrist. That was the story the galaxy believed. And then Selha changed it. Selha had been taken to the Academy Medical Center immediately after the incident. Her injuries were not severe by Earth standards: a concussion, bruised ribs, cuts from the Joreth's crystalline grip. But for a Veleris, they were significant. She had spent 8 hours in a healing pod, drifting in and out of consciousness, while the galaxy burned around her friend. When she woke up, a medical attendant told her what had happened. The footage. The charges, the protests, the political machinery grinding into motion to use Kira as proof that humans did not belong in civilized space. Selha listened to all of it. Then she asked for a data terminal. "You need rest," the attendant said. "I need a data terminal," Selha repeated, and something in her voice made the attendant comply. What no one at the academy understood, what no one had ever thought to investigate, was why Selha's shortened arm was different from a normal Veleris limb. The birth defect that had made her an outcast, that had caused her family to send her away in shame, that had made other students mock her and avoid her, was not simply a matter of size. Her shortened arm had developed differently at a cellular level. The neural pathways were denser. The bioelectric channels were more concentrated. Where a normal Veleris arm could generate light for decoration and communication, Selha's arm could interface directly with electronic systems. She had discovered this when she was 12. She had told no one. On a station built entirely on interconnected digital systems, it was the most powerful secret a person could hold. Selha connected her shortened arm to the data terminal. She closed her eyes and reached into the Academy's network, not through standard access channels, but through the deep infrastructure, the maintenance systems, the security architecture. She moved through the data like water through pipes, finding the pathways that were never meant to be found. She located the internal surveillance recordings from the corridor, every camera, every angle, every second. She found the full, unedited footage starting from the moment Ravik's group had grabbed her, through the assault, the neural disruptor blast and Kira's response. All of it, the complete truth. Then she did something that would be talked about in union communications courses for decades. She did not send the footage to a news network. She did not give it to a journalist. She did not hand it to the Academy administration, who had already proven they could not be trusted. She sent it everywhere, every open communication channel on the galactic net, every news platform, every social network, every public forum, every emergency broadcast frequency. Simultaneously, she attached a single message in trade script. This is what happened, all of it. The galaxy watched. They saw Ravik's group drag Selha into the corridor. They saw the mocking, the cruelty, the deliberate targeting of her disability. They saw her thrown to the ground. They saw the blood. They saw Kira arrive. They saw her stand still and ask, calmly, for her friend to be released. They saw the neural disruptor fired at her shoulder, a weapon that should have put any being in the galaxy on the floor in convulsions. They saw her take the hit and stay standing. They saw her breathe through it. They saw her not fall. And then they saw Ravik kick a wounded girl on the ground and turn to smirk at the Deathworlder, and they saw the moment Kira moved, not with rage, not with bloodlust, not with the mindless aggression of the animal they had been told she was. They saw her move with precision. They saw her stop Ravik with exactly enough force and no more. They saw her take the weapon away gently. They saw her place herself between her friend and the aggressors. They saw her say, "You touched my friend," and the way the corridor fell silent. And then the comments began. Billions of them, in 100 languages, from 1,000 worlds. They said many things, but the most common, the one that echoed across every platform and every species, was a question no one had ever thought to ask. What kind of being absorbs that much pain and then chooses not to hurt anyone? The political machinery that had been grinding toward Kira's destruction stuttered and jammed. The Union Council, which had been preparing to discuss emergency sanctions against humanity, paused. The Academy administration, which had been drafting expulsion documents, stopped. Because the galaxy was no longer looking at a dangerous animal. They were looking at a 17-year-old girl who had been beaten and electrocuted and mocked for weeks, who had every ability to destroy the people hurting her, and who had chosen, deliberately, consciously, at enormous personal cost, to be merciful. 3 days after the footage went viral, Kira's father arrived on Station Veleris. He came with a small delegation from Earth's diplomatic corps, 4 people, no security detail, no weapons, no threats. He walked through the station's corridors with the same steady, unhurried pace his daughter walked with, and he sat down across from the Academy's chancellor in a room that suddenly felt very small. "My daughter," he said, "was raised on a world where the air, the water, the ground, and the wildlife could kill her. She learned to survive before she learned to read. She learned to control the strength her world gave her before she learned to write her name. And when your students attacked her, when they shot her with a weapon and beat her friend in front of her, she chose mercy." He leaned forward slightly. "I need you to explain to me why your institution could not offer her the same." The chancellor opened his mouth, then he closed it, then he opened it again. He had no answer. The charges against Kira Voss were dropped on a Tuesday. She was sitting in the holding cell when the door opened and a Union legal officer, a tall, thin being with silver skin and 6 fingers on each hand, stepped inside and told her she was free. He explained that the full evidence had been reviewed, that witness statements had been taken, and that the case had been reclassified from aggravated assault by a Deathworld species to justified defensive action. He spoke in the formal, clipped tone of someone reading from a legal document, but his eyes kept drifting to Kira's face, with something she had never seen directed at her on the station. "Respect." She walked out of the holding area and into a corridor filled with light. Selha was waiting for her. The Veleris girl had bandages on her head and one arm in a healing brace, and she was crying not from pain, but from relief. Kira crossed the distance between them and wrapped her arms around her friend, gently, carefully, with the precise control of someone who always knew exactly how much force she was using. "I am sorry," Kira whispered. "I should have been faster. I should have stopped them before they hurt you." Selha pulled back and looked at her with those large dark eyes. "You saved me. That is all that matters." They walked out of the security wing together. The station had changed. Kira could feel it in the air, in the way people moved around her. It was not that the fear was gone. Fear built over centuries did not disappear in a week. But something else was there now, sitting alongside the fear, reshaping it. She passed a group of Chiik students in the corridor, and one of them, young, nervous, its mandibles clicking rapidly, stepped forward and said, "I watched the full footage. I wanted to say, I am glad you are okay." Kira stopped. She had been preparing to keep walking, to keep her head down, to keep being invisible. But the Chiik was looking at her with genuine warmth, and she realized she did not have to hide right now. "Thank you," she said. "That means more than you know." In the days that followed, the consequences of Ravik's scheme unfolded rapidly. The off-station political operative, the older Jorath who had been directing the conspiracy, was identified through communication records that Selha's broadcast had triggered investigators to examine. He was arrested on charges of conspiracy, incitement to violence, and illegal weapons distribution. The neural disruptor was traced back to a black market dealer on a neighboring station, and that investigation expanded into a wider crackdown. Ravik himself was expelled from the academy. His family, one of the most powerful noble houses in Jorath society, issued a public statement disowning his actions. It was a calculated political move, designed to protect their own interests, and everyone knew it. But it was still a Jorath noble family publicly admitting that what had been done to a human was wrong. In the long history of galactic politics, that was something new. His 3 followers faced criminal charges. The one who had fired the neural disruptor was sentenced to 4 years in a rehabilitation facility. The others received lesser sentences. The Academy's residential coordinator, the elderly Jorath who had received Kira's complaints and done nothing, was quietly removed from his position. But the larger changes were the ones that mattered. The Galactic Union Council opened a formal inquiry into systemic discrimination against Deathworld species in educational and public institutions. It was the first inquiry of its kind. For centuries, the laws governing Deathworld species had existed in a quiet corner of Union code, unchallenged, because no Deathworld species had ever been advanced enough to question them. Humanity had changed that. The laws that tripled penalties for violent acts committed by Class 9 and above species were challenged for the first time in Union history. A coalition of 37 species, including, remarkably, several Joreth progressive factions, co-sponsored a resolution to review and reform the entire Deathworld legal framework. The resolution did not pass immediately. These things never did. But it was introduced and debated and taken seriously, and that was a beginning. Kira returned to classes. The atmosphere was different, not transformed. She was not naive enough to believe that centuries of prejudice could be erased by a single viral moment, but cracked. Something had broken open, and light was getting through. Students who had avoided her for weeks now approached cautiously. A young Joreth, not connected to Ravik, horrified by what had been done in his species' name, asked if he could sit with Kira and Selha at lunch. His name was Torek, and his hands shook when he introduced himself, but he sat down anyway, and they talked about crystalline geology for an hour. Professor Thalene, the xenobiology instructor who had shown the Earth documentary, invited Kira to join an advanced seminar on extreme biosphere adaptation. "I have studied Deathworlds for 40 years, she told Kira after class. "I thought I understood what they produced. I was wrong. I would like to learn from someone who actually lived it." Selha became something she had never been before, celebrated. The Galactic Net hailed her as the person who had exposed the truth. News profiles were written about her. Veleris cultural commentators discussed her story, and for the first time, the conversation turned to the stigma of physical disability in Veleris society. Her shortened arm, the thing that had made her an outcast, that her family had been ashamed of, that other students had mocked, was the exact thing that had allowed her to access the surveillance system and change the course of events. What had been called broken turned out to be the thing that saved everything. Her family contacted her for the first time in months. Her mother's face appeared on the communication screen and she was weeping. "We were wrong," she said. "We were so wrong about you." Selha was quiet for a long time after that call. She sat with Kira on their observation deck, their place, the quiet spot on level 7 where they had spent so many evenings hiding from a station that did not want them and stared at the stars. "Do you think it will last?" Selha asked. "The change, or will they forget and go back to being afraid?" Kira considered the question carefully. She thought about Earth, about the long, slow, painful history of her own species learning to be better than its worst instincts, about the wars and the cruelties and the long dark chapters, and about the moments of grace that had somehow kept pulling them forward. "Some will forget," she said. "Some will go back, but not all of them. And the ones who remember will teach others. It is slow. It is messy. But it is how it works. Trust me, my species has been practicing this for a very long time." Selha looked at her. "Were you afraid in the corridor when it happened?" Kira was quiet. She watched a cargo ship drift past the window, its running lights blinking green and white against the darkness. "No," she said. "I was angry, and on Earth, anger without control gets you killed just as fast as anything else. The weather, the predators, the diseases, none of them care how angry you are. So you learn, you feel everything, every bit of it, and then you choose what to do with it." Selha was silent for a long time. Then she said, very quietly, "I think that is the most frightening and beautiful thing I have ever heard." Kira smiled, a real smile, teeth and all, and for the first time the person sitting next to her did not flinch. 6 months later, the Galactic Net's most-watched educational documentary series released a new episode. It was not like the one that had been shown in Professor Thalene's class. It did not focus on the storms, the predators, the earthquakes, or the violence. Instead, it opened with a shot of a sunrise over an ocean, golden light spreading across water that stretched to the horizon, waves rolling gently onto a beach where small creatures left trails in the sand. It showed a mother holding a newborn child. It showed children laughing in a schoolyard. It showed an old man planting a tree he would never see fully grown. It showed a species that had been forged in the most hostile environment in known space and had somehow come out the other side with the ability to love, to hope, to forgive, and to reach across the vast emptiness of space with an open hand. The episode was titled Earth, the World That Breeds Mercy. The final shot was simple: a girl with brown hair walking through a crowded corridor on a space station, a four-armed friend at her side, surrounded by beings from 100 different worlds. Some still watched her with fear. Some watched with curiosity. Some watched with something new, something that might, with time and patience, become understanding. The narrator spoke the final words over that image, and when the episode aired, 11 billion beings heard them at the same time. We spent centuries asking how anything could survive a death world. We never thought to ask what it would become. The answer, it turns out, is stronger than we ever feared and kinder than we ever deserved. The screen went dark. Across the galaxy, the silence that followed was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of a world beginning to shift.